Hey, what's going on, everyone? This your boy Freeze coming at you with the weekly, well, pre-recorded stream. And today we're gonna be talking about, obviously it's Endurance Week, so we'll take one last look at the new Endurance bots. So for those of you on the Decepticon side, we will be getting Demolisher. And then for those of you on the Autobot side, you'll be getting Overload. So I still don't have the artwork yet, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. We also, um, a conversation came up earlier this week when I was talking to some fellow testers, and we were kind of just thinking ahead a little bit for HQ 19. And one of the conversations that came up is that we still got a couple of prime cores left. And we were just trying to figure out, well, what should we do with those? So I want to talk about my thoughts on that and some of my annoyances that came with that when we were still in HQ 18 and what I think we should do going forward. So I want to talk about that. And I also have some information on the next combat bot. Well, I mean, they got it sitting in there as a combat bot right now, but it looks to me more like it's a weapon. So I do want to get some clarification on that. But right now they got it in the combat slot. So we'll talk about that. It's kind of bugged on my end. I know a lot of the Autobot playtesters didn't have that problem. But they're working on it because I can already see they're working on it because it's better than it was. So we can talk about it. I might try to show it to see if it's fixed by then. But all in all, should be, even though it's pre-recorded this week again, should still be pretty good stream. So um, let's go ahead and we'll start off by the part we've already talked about, and we'll talk about Demolisher. All right, so this is the endurance bot that will be in the event starting tomorrow. Um, and like I mentioned, not last week, I was out last week and I actually still wanted to put together some content, but then I kind of completely forgot about Father's Day and stuff like that. My weekend was all booked up, and then work was actually pretty booked up too. But um, so apologies for that. But Demolisher's got this ability salvo session. It says transform into a mobile missile launcher and cast a dome that grants allies 50% damage shields and hack immunity for 15 seconds. Fire 10 salvo missiles at targets. So right here, I've got the maxed out private rank. So I got them all the way up to 70. And so at that level, it deals 199 ability damage, 2-second cooldown in between. So all in all, that ability takes 15 seconds. And what I didn't mention, now that I got a chance to test it more, I think the last time we talked about it, I had really just started to test it. One of the things that I was looking at more as kind of a problem for me is that 15 seconds. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. Let me go ahead and I'll start off with actually I'll go into a normal battle. And I got Demolisher just kind of plugged in with the rest of my war team and stuff like that. So what I want to do is take them into the prime zone. And one of the things I want to look at and focus on a little bit heavier this go around is the fact that this guy's got to keep up with the rest of his team, right? So and I'm just going to, for the purpose of showing them off, I'm going to drop that whole team. And so if I go use that ability, 15 seconds seems like it's good. It's a long time. But he's also going to be shooting off those rockets at long range. So, they're all covered. They're covered, but now they're starting to destroy stuff and they're starting to move forward. Now, they're starting to walk outside of that area. And so that's going to be one of those things that could be problematic for me. Now, I actually recently bought exhaust back to my team, just to kind of help with some of the increased difficulty and stuff. And so I know the homie Chris Harmon was like, "Hey, is this something that we could use together? Go use both sets of shields." And so for me personally, and we had a conversation about this earlier in the week, I was saying to Chris, I was like, "Look, I'm not opposed to using two characters similar type of abilities." But say, like in this instance, I go stop and I go use, and I use this ability now. So he's got his target picked out, and I'm gonna zoom in some. Now the rest of that team is walking away from that shield, and that's the one problem I really have now. If your strategy is built around that, to to Chris's point, one of the things that I was going to try was use exhaust in one area and then use Demolisher in a different area, and now you got this really, really wide shield range. I could see that being a value, but the truth is that there are going to be times when you're going to destroy stuff. Like, say you use a lot of AoE and you destroy this stuff really quickly, he's going to get left behind. And for me, I was like, that's one big flaw. That really, it bothers me a little bit. The concept itself is amazing. I love the concept. I love, you guys who know me. I know a couple of guys um, that talk with me regularly. No, I love a good support bot, because when I go look at this damage, I was like, all right, man, that damage is, it's, I'm not dying to go do 199 ability damage even if it's per second, to any particular targets. It's not going to really take anything out with that being the case. So it's not like heavy on damage to me. So, but I do like the shield, and so when I start comparing it to other shielders, you know, um, or damage protection, here, we've got Cutthroat 4-star at 60% damage reduction. So, and as you look through me going through the game, you're gonna see some of the rework tooltips and stuff. I still do plan to talk about um, the overall project that they have going on with some of the bug fixes, buffs, nerfs, and stuff like that. Trying to let stuff get a little bit more settled, a little bit more finalized. I know a lot of the other content creators have already been doing stuff. So, but then I go look at a bot like Exhaust, who I've also got plugged in right now. And so for him, that's a 13-second ability. Force field reflects 32%. So you get to do some damage through that with the reflection. It's at a lower percentage, but you're also healing at the same time with that ability 11. So that's kind of your trade-off. It's like, hey, it's going to shield some, it's going to heal some. Awesome bot that I hope they make into a 5-star sometime soon. But with Demolisher, it's more of it's more of a shield, and he just so happens to do some damage. So what I'm picturing in my head, and I know there are some people that still do this. I think, and I want to test something real quick, because I think for those who like to start off battles with just their gunners, which is, top leagues is quite a bit of people. It's quite a bit of people who like to start off with their gunners and just let them take some of the, clean some stuff up. So what I'll do is I'll drop Demolisher, and I'll drop a couple of my gunners here, and I will just use that. And it's not a lot attacking me here, but just for the sake of demonstrating, I'll let them kind of clear out that front area. Now, I could see it being used for something like that because they're going to stand there in that same spot for a while. And then they're going to advance. So I think it's going to take you some good timing with this bot. I am going for the 5-star. I know a lot of people have just been kind of concerned about, just how, when endurance bots come out, they was like, well, are they going to be in the meta? Am I going to be able to use them on my war team? Can you use this? Yes. Um, the problem is, what are you going to be willing to sacrifice on your team to do it? I mean, 50% is pretty good, but I imagine there's some people that just still got old school, they got the old school like tracks of cutthroat. They'll probably say, well, I'll just use tracks of cutthroat. And then you still wind up, doing decent amounts of damage. And I actually had some people that was like, hey man, this bot's overpowered. I don't think that it's overpowered. I think they balanced it out by giving him the long duration, and they balanced it out by, honestly, by his ability lasting so long. I think even if this was like a 10-second ability, I think we'd be cool. When you make this into a 15, when you make it such a long ability, he's gonna kind of hang around in the back. So, but anyway, let me know your thoughts on the new button. Let me know in the chat if you're planning on going for 4-star or 5-star this weekend. And I just realized I did never went into this week's newsletter, so let's go and take a look at that. All right, so this is week 8, obviously, this endurance weekend, and the event. So it's got up here Smart Tech, that's actually last weekend's event. This actually called End of Days Territory, and like I said, it's the endurance event. Just showed you what was at stake. We got opportunities there for the 4-star and 5-star Demolisher. So you've got 4-star version at 1.5 mil as usual, and then 5-star at 3.5 mil. And then you have a major rank that you can earn at 4 million. So I know the alliances I'm fighting. Well, I'm fighting at home in the Horde this weekend, but um, our allies that we're teaming up with, they went ahead and pushed it up to. They pushed it up to bids of 100K, so that means everybody's getting not only the 5-star, but they also getting that major rank item pushing for completion, which is helpful. I do want to start seeing more of the general ranks in the game. I guess my thing is, if they were going to introduce it, then make it accessible to players. So that's still a sore spot for me. I don't have any generals yet, and I'm playing in Top War. I support the game pretty heavily. Well, to be honest with you, though, it's like I don't buy bundles. It's like a lot of times you just fighting for chances at stuff, and like I just want to be able to say, hey, if I'm putting my time and energy and effort into the game and my money into the game, let me earn it. So if they were just going to just only put major ranks in these events, which at one point they did want to do both. Um, and, I did make a proposal, a couple months ago. Go ahead and put it in the game, so that people, it'll incentivize people to spend. That's like even if they added some more points to the event totals, and I know people don't like when I talk like that, um, but it is how I feel about it. So it's 105 tiers. Some of the stuff that you can get 5K 3-star shards, 2.5K 4-star shards, 1K 5-star shards, 75K premium shards, and you can get 250K of your spark and combiner spark, 10 gold power cores, 5G metal cores, 1G G1 core, 1 bot G metal power core, 1 building G metal power core, 150 of your total sparks and total shards. So they got the percentages down there for your spark crystal. Um, so they got 11% drop rates for you to either get 5K, 7.5K, or 10K of each kind of spark. That's regular spark, combiner spark, and combat spark. And then they get 25% chances to drop either 25 5-star shards, 100 4-star shards, 200 3-star shards, or 1.5K of premium crystal shards. So ultimately, this is one of those events where I'm just like, okay, you're getting the typical stuff. The prize here is to get your new bot, and I do like there's a shit ton of total spark crystals and total shard crystals, so that works for me. Um, you don't always like the waiting on the chances in it, but and then but at the end there is a major rank item if you for the go those who are completing the event. Like I just yeah, I mean I do want the major rank item. I want to start seeing generals in these things, and even if that makes them push the event a little bit harder, I'd be okay with that. But I know a lot of people aren't, so we just got to figure out some other ways to go about that. Typical battle zones. I mean, obviously, you can amplify those by mayhem mode. Those are your normal zones right there, and then you got the bios for both of the bots, and the artwork. So you got Overload there and Demolisher looking pretty cool. And there also is going to be, so they're talking about, um, they're talking about primes. And so they made this survey. I'm actually going to click into the survey real quick. So, okay, it's actually off screen a little bit, so I won't go into the survey. But long story short is just, I think it was about 4 or 5 questions asking players just what do they want to see, and they've already made a couple of cryptic messages suggesting possibly a character that we're going to get going into the future, and well, probably the near future. And so now they're starting to ask questions to see, well, what do you want the ability to do, just different stuff like that to try to get some feedback on what kind of bot we need. So I actually need some time to think about that before I go answer that survey. But make sure you guys do that so you can kind of have your hand in possibly designing this bot. All right, so they got a Cyber Pass sneak peek, and it looks like okay, so like they got some skins. Is that Spinister? Who's that? Is that Wing Saber they got there? Who is that? But yeah, so they got that, and obviously here's the saga schedule. We are at the end of this saga. Um, and I'm kind of curious to see how the next saga goes, just because you know this saga was strange, man. When I go back and look at this saga, and we had all the controversy, when they tried to do the Titan event in the previous saga, and they settled on 125K individual back in week 2. Then I was just like, huh, all right, yeah, I knew I was gonna go for the Titan. I do feel like a lot of people, because of the notice started to get up to be a little bit short, and some people was just like, man, I don't want to do 125K, and whatever the reasons were. But I do think it causes a little bit of a disparity. I think that some people are like, well, I'll just wait for the next ones to come out because they'll be better. And I don't know. I feel like when you try to stick wild card, I always categorize that as wild card content. So that I put content in a couple of different categories. And so for me, like when you look at week 4 on an event, you know that week 4 is going to be a combat. So, and you know that week 8 is going to be an endurance. And this is why I really started pushing for the 12-week schedule, because there's going to be other content that you want to put into the game, like a Titan. They got you put the combiner events and stuff in there. It's going to be different ones that always pop up during the course of the year, and that you could just put those particular events. You can put it in the fourth week of another, uh, another 4-week interval in the saga, and that perfectly aligns up with, in business, you measure a lot of stuff in quarters, so it'll line up perfectly for the quarter. But then, we just had to you wind up kind of just stuffing events in there. You had to stuff the Titan event in there. You had to stuff the ninth anniversary stuff in there, which, we didn't wind up getting any, getting a free 5-star bottle combat this time. They had some great deals in there for bundles that, I participated in some of that. But and like I said, I rarely buy bundles, but when they're like real good value, they start doing Dino Gate, which I didn't do this time. I'll do bundles like that, and I'll also do bundles like when they were giving away a bunch of Combat Spark and stuff like that for the anniversaries past weekend, then I was like, cool, man, I'll participate in that because it's a really good value. Be sure to check out all your content creators, your official ones, myself, Soldier, Century Kawaza, CF, and Val. And make sure you check out all your unofficial ones as well. So, yeah, let's make sure we support those guys. If you already have um, if you're unofficial and you got links you want to share, feel free to share them in the chat. All right, we got community corner and some cool artwork as always. Looks like we got some artwork of Devastator in there this time. So shout out to Fries who built that. And they got in there about Team Stream, trying to figure that out, because I'm not sure how that was, and I only caught like a little snippet of that when the apes, the Yodos had their last stream, and it sounded like they were moving away from streaming as heavily. So we'll see how that goes. I know some people were concerned about it, but we'll wait and see how that turns out. And that's what we got for the news this week. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at an idea it's not even really an idea I came up with for HQ18, but it's two prime cores that I want to talk about, and kind of the direction that they were going originally. So let's take a look at that. So back when we were getting in the later stages of HQ18, I want to say it was phase 3, because they were talking about they were going to do a 4, and they decided not to do a 4. One of the things that came up was prime cores, and I want to go take a look at the ones we already have, because an interesting conversation came up, and I'll be honest with you, in this particular conversation I had some really, really strong opinions, primarily because we look at when we started building defensive prime cores, one of the things that we really focused on heavily was we really started to focus heavily on symmetry between the offensive counterparts. So, like, I'll use an example. Right here, we've got highlighted Megatronus. On defense, Megatronus deals with fire. When you go over to, the bot version of Megatronus, it deals with, it deals with fire as well. So when you go look at this stuff, um, one of the talking points is all this stuff has to do exactly the same, or not exactly the same, but it has to do something similar to what its offensive counterpart does, right? And I understand that, but we were talking, and one of the things that came up was that, well, it's a rule that it needs to be that way. And that's like, well, I don't think that that's a rule. I think at this point we're just making design for your prime cores, um, as opposed to it being a rule. And for me, I'll tell you the difference. Like, to me, when you say something's a rule, actually, I'm gonna leave out of here for a second, and I'm gonna come and I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna go to knockout and skids. One of the things that's become a rule is, say, something like acid damage, right? Few years back, they said, hey, all acid's gonna do anti-heal. So targets, so they actually had to wind up making a separate little tooltip. They wind up putting all these little icons explaining to you what acid damage does. It says that targets affected by acid cannot be healed, and they also take plus 20 fire damage. Life steal's unaffected, so a lot of your cores and your combats to do life steal not affected, nightstick fracas, stuff like that. It's very clear, it's very explicit. It wasn't always that way, but this is what they added for that. So for me, that's a rule. And if you bought out something asset wise that did not do that, then I would say, yeah, no, this is breaking the rules of the game. When I look at your prime cores, ideally, do you want them to have symmetry? Yes, you do, with their offensive counterparts. But that's just not necessarily the case. And I bring all of this up now simply because back when we were going to originally introduce the Alpha Trion core on defense. Now, this is in the missing in action section that I only have on playtest. This was the idea that they were going to come up with. They wanted to make an Alpha Trion core that increases attack and effect range. I mean, I guess really attack range, and I mean, I guess area of effect if it's something like, if it's something that kind of spreads out. Like, I'm thinking about like shock towers and stuff like that. The range is going to change a little bit. And I say all of that because when I looked at the concept, I said, hey, that's a pretty good idea. You can add range, probably have it in a certain area where you could add that range. And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. People will probably use it near the MDS. That'll be awesome. Like, when it, particularly when you were at a time period where people were saying the defensive meta was struggling. But then we ran into this argument and just like, well, Alpha Trion on offense, and I'll pull that up real quick. Say Alpha Trion on offense adds ability points. So, you know, this prime core needs to do something with ability points. Now, two things. The first thing is I don't even think they have the tech to do that, which, well, I think that's what they said at the time, which honestly is kind of hard to believe. If you can do add ability points on offense, you should be able to like take them away. And I remember talking about it on the live stream when it first happened. But the Alpha Trion core, which is highly used by a lot of top players, you add ability points once every 8.5 seconds. With it being maxed out. So definitely a good tool to have. I don't always use it because I don't always have room for it. I do use Nexus over Alpha Trion in a lot of cases, but I've seen a lot of rankings or just explanation videos for Prime Cores. I mean, I think I made one years ago myself, but most people say definitely use this on offense. Here's my problem with if you did that same concept on defense. If you do it on defense, essentially what you could have, is I wouldn't have it taking points away, but they were saying even if it came up one time to say, what if you made it so that, what if you made it so that until you destroyed this particular building, what if you made it so that you didn't gain any ability points? And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like that. I think that would be overpowered. And I think that what would happen is you would get these bases. So look at, oh, I'm still in the bot one. You would get these bases where people would do something like this. They wind up sticking this Alpha Trion core in the back, probably under a shield. They put them out of reach for most bots, and you just have a really difficult time reaching back there to destroy the building that's equipped with the Alpha Trion core. Um, and then you'd be stuck probably about halfway through the battle, just not being able to do anything, gain any ability points. Um, and I understand that we need challenges defensively. I just don't think I just don't think that's the way we would want to go with it, right? But something that I definitely know is good for defense is adding more range. So the conversation came up that, well, if you want to go add more range on defense, then just make another core. And I was like, well, no, because for each prime core, there's only one. And so if you're going to do range in an area, nah, I think it's a good idea. I think it's something you can use it, just kind of give a little bit of boost somewhere on the map, and I'm not opposed to it. Um, at level one, what they want to do is put 6%. And this is why I like in playtest, I like when we actually test, because what'll happen a lot of times is, honestly, like the community sometimes, kind of like I was alluding to with that Prime survey, sometimes they give us just a little bit too much input. And I know it doesn't always feel like it because there's a lot of things we want in the game and they don't get addressed in a timely manner. But I feel like if we are, I use the analogy sometimes. For those of us who have children, you'd be like, hey, you ask your kid, what do you want for dinner? And they'd be like, oh, well, I want cookies, cakes, and ice cream. And they say, well, you can have that stuff sometimes, but you're not gonna have that for dinner. And I feel like sometimes when they ask us what we want is to have cookies, cake, and ice cream for dinner every day, for the rest of our life. And that's just not practical. Sometimes we want stuff that's overpowered. Sometimes we want stuff that just not balanced with where the game is at. And I say all of that because we just can't. You just can't incorporate all the feedback all the time. You can listen to it, but for sure, and you can try to even add elements of it. But then sometimes once people start getting in disagreements, you try to add all of this stuff while still trying to make balance, and you wind up having content that's not that good. And that's what I'm trying to avoid with this Alpha Trion core. So I was looking around because one of the arguments got made that, well, just you should just make a regular core that does range. But you know, we already have some that are specific to defenses, like this target protocol. Is adding plus 20%. Range. When you look at you know well, missile launchers already have really really incredible range, so I don't think they added anything to those, but they did add to the beam lasers. Cybertronian charge adds quite a bit of range. To slow down, adds 30% as well. And it's already a decent long range weapon. So when I think of a prime core, I'm thinking of something that you can use to kind of help with like the shock towers, the MDS possibly. You know, even Thunderstorm has increased range. But what if I, it would be pretty cool to be able to use Thunderstorm and then stack it with this Alpha Trion core, and then you can just have this go way, way out. And when you look at the damage that comes out of a shock tower, it wouldn't be overpowered because it's doing 320 per second. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at. I definitely want to see. I wanted to stick with the original idea, and I want people to actually test it. And that's why I was going with the feedback thing that I was talking about. Is that I don't feel comfortable speaking on stuff, and I have not tested it out at all. Like they gave us this information. They say, hey, what do you guys think? And everybody was like, not everybody, but a few folks was like, well, I think it sucks. Like, you should be doing something with ability points. And I saw this conversation that some of the testers were having going in that direction again, and I'm just like, no, like, bro, like, even if it's not range, like, we need to consider something up there. Like, I would rather we come out there with one of the last two prime cores, excuse me, that we have, and they actually be good than to say it mirrors the other one, because the other one, I'm gonna keep it a band with you. If you go take this Alpha Trion core and it has something to do with ability points, then ultimately it's a counter to the offense of the bot version of the Alpha Trion core. And so now you can have a potential where either you make the other power core, the other prime core useless, the bot Alpha Trion, or there are certain situations where you could make, if you made this, say, stop, um, maybe if it made you stop gaining ability points, now, more people might go to try to go equip the offensive one, and essentially you could have both of these power cores canceling each other out. And that's like, bro, like, that's a waste, in my opinion, because when you look at all the other power cores, there's things you can do to protect yourself against, like a Megatronus or Prime core, but ultimately these are cores that are always going to work, and what I don't want to do is prevent that. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Um, I think the range would actually be sufficient. You can stack it with other cores that have range as a portion of it. You know, um, I just don't know. I'd love to see it. And I actually am curious what they do with the Nexus Prime core as well, because when we talk about symmetry for those, so there's, the idea, the concept that they had originally is that your combiner is going to gain 33.5 percent DPS and ability damage, and the enemy combiner takes plus 33.5% DPS and ability damage while this building remains active. So it's another one that would kind of mirror the bot core. Now, the bot version says while the equipped bots in battle deal plus 33.5% again to enemy combiners. If you deploy the equipped bot before your combiner on attack, your combiner will also gain 33.5%. So it's a boost that you get to your team. Yeah, and then it also reduces raid damage by 50%. So this is one of those cores where I like to use it as the combiners got a little bit more durable, with some of their effects that they have from some of their abilities. I like to get them off the map fast, not be held up by them. So I actually like to use this a lot. My issue is, and I was trying to, it's just kind of too fast for it, but I'm pretty sure that the bot version also works on Um, a portion of that actually works on defense, the part that actually lets your combiner do more damage. So if this does, if this did indeed stack, then that would be kind of problematic, and it would start to push the boundary of being slightly overpowered. So from that aspect, I almost kind of think that we need to go rethink exactly how we want to do the Nexus Prime one also, because technically speaking, you can have Nexus Prime equipped on a bot in the outpost, and this is one of those things like, if they did it this way, would it stack? So that's interesting to me. And then, of course, the Alpha Trion thing is interesting to me. I don't know how it's going to turn out. They hadn't, the team hadn't started talking about it. It was a group of testers saying, hey, we should do something about this. And I was just like, look, it's a sore spot for me, just because I know the argument that comes from us not doing that Alpha Trion core this way, where, you could make it have massive range. So let me know what you think. What kind of ideas do you have for the Alpha Trion and the Nexus Prime cores? Uh, I would just imagine, and the team has not said this. I just would imagine that at some point we're gonna have to start working on, and we're gonna have to start working on these last two Prime cores, and with HQ19 coming out, everybody always asks me, not everybody, but a lot of people always ask me, well, when are they going to do new prime cores? And I always get the same answer. I was like, well, when did the last prime cores come out? And the response is usually, I don't know. And I was like, every time new prime cores came out, it was with a HQ phase or a HQ update. So I would expect the same thing again this go around. And that's why I believe that some of the testers are pushing it now, because we're almost there. I mean, we're halfway through the year. We're almost in July, and I would imagine this stuff is coming toward the end of the year. So, at least phase one, and the last phase might not necessarily be this year. I'm almost would imagine that would be, you know, next year. But let me know your thoughts. And lastly, I want to take a look at the new combat. So let's go over there to that. So we have a new. They've got it in here as a combat, and you can see it on the screen. That's the combat screen, and they got the Armada Dark Saber coming to us for the Decepticon side, and then they got the Armada Star Saber coming on the Autobot side. Now, this one's the concept is interesting. I will say that I have it here at level 10, 5-star version, and the tooltip reads increases DPS by 32%. Every 10 seconds, create a space in which nearby foes are hit 5 times, each dealing 40% of the bot's DPS. So that already it's kind of interesting, because you're going to increase the normal DPS, but then that ability is going to do 40% of the bot's DPS. I wouldn't mind actually seeing that bumped up a little bit. Now, I will say this is really my first time getting a chance to test it, because there's been a bug that made my bot get stuck on the battlefield, or on the not even on the battlefield. It got stuck on on the tarmac, like on the launch, like on the deployment pad. So but it also says this attack weakens the attack power of enemies by 20% for 7 seconds. Now, when I go give it ability 11, that damage boost goes up to 41%. Bro, that's kind of cheap. I mean, that's when you have to fit when you have to think about the fact that you have to give a million of your combat spark, which is a lot. I know a lot of people saying they're walking around there with millions and millions and millions of combat spark, but these level 11s, honestly, just they're just not as good. Some of them is I would have wanted. So they were saying, or no, 41% on the damage boost is good. It's just a regular DPS. So I'm gonna go ahead and upgrade that. But some just aren't as good as others. And when I look at this, this is something that I can equip to melee special class and warriors. So I actually put mine on Rod U for the time being, as he's on my war team. But then again, I started thinking, well, maybe this is something that I might wind up using on defense as well. So I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Probably make a different choice. Right now, I'm just kind of feeling it out. Probably make a whole separate video talking about strategies with this thing as we go forward. But let's just take a look and see what it does. You know, we read the tooltip. Let's take a look and see what it actually does. So we'll go, I'm gonna go into zone 15 for a minute because I'll probably talk pretty slow. And I would like to have that opportunity to see it in action while I talk it out. Alright, so I put it on Rod U. It's Inferno for you guys on the Autobot side. And one of the things I'm looking at is, you know, this ability on this combat. So here, and you don't really see too much of an animation, but you know, you see him hit a couple of targets there. Now, I've seen him hit as many as like 4 targets at a time. It looks like they might have fixed the bug that I was having before. But you know, that's a decent little amount of damage there. It almost looks like it might not be. I wonder if that's more damage than it's supposed to be doing, honestly. But right now, I do think it is kind of bugged because I keep getting like stunned. And that time I got stunned because it was an actual mine, or I guess they say it's like T-locked. You know, I had the motion, not a motion sensing mine, but the actual stasis mine. But yeah, you can see it covers a couple of little squares and just, you know, just add some damage. And you know, if you're using a warrior, you know, it's kind of just something extra. I don't know if people are actually going to use it, but it's just, yeah, it's a little something to help you take down defenses a little bit faster. You know, it's going to do those 5 hits based on the ability damage. Now, I want to try it because it's a melee type. It makes me want to go use it on a bot that's maybe a little bit deals a little bit more damage. And so then I'm gonna start looking at my melee special class bots as well. So let's see. I will go into bot cores combats, and I'm gonna find this thing and I'm gonna equip it on a different bot. Now, when I start looking at melee specials, and you know, T2 Optimal Optimus got a lot. I don't really use half shell like that anymore, but he's got a lot of damage. Let's see what we got melee wise. You know, impact this damage is decent. I don't have him built up a little bit, but Dive Bomb's got some decent damage. You know, so you got a couple we can pick from. You know, even though I got the 5-star on my playtest account, Megatron, I can see something like that. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on T2 because it's gonna have a, you know, now at level 11, it's gonna have a 41% damage boost to his normal attack. So that in itself is pretty cool. So what I'll do is I'll just add him in here with the rest of my war team. And even though I wouldn't do this in game because it, well, you know, I was looking at cost, but I usually also always have Leo Prime up there. or not Leo Prime Wolf. On my end, it would be Predacon Inferno, but I get stuck sometimes speaking in Autobot because there's so many Autobot testers. But this makes me curious. It makes me curious, how much damage I be doing with T2 and OO. And he's already got a couple of passives there. He's already breathing some fire. And so those are the things that I'm looking at, even though I got hacked here. Just adding a little bit of extra damage there. And I'm actually kind of curious because T2 is so heavily used on um, on defense, how that looks as well. So let me take a look where I got him located. I think I got him in the bottom right outpost. If I remember correctly, yeah, he's in the bottom right outpost here. So I will actually try him out on defense. See how that affects my squad. Alright, so I'm going to deploy that whole squad there just to get this outpost popped and see how much damage they do against the squad. And it's going to be one of those things you're going to have to wait on it a little bit. Yeah, and so he didn't really been, I don't even think he got a chance to get that attack off. So, that little delay, I kind of like, and I noticed this with some of the recent combats, that the combats have a tendency in most cases to deliver the whatever ability it has right away. Um, I'll use the example of like a lot of people are using Tip Top, and even though that's a long ability, the first thing it does is use that ability. And so that might be a portion of the feedback that I give here is to, use this ability, use it, set it so it defaults to using that ability early. But not pretty cool. You can definitely use a damage increase. I would probably prefer it on a melee special as opposed to a tank. Just because you're gonna get more value, 41% more on like 960, 970, DPS is gonna be better than it's gonna be on some of our actual tanks. So yeah, I was looking around and you know, Bludgeon, who I've got on here as a captain, he does just under 600. And they just don't have the amount of damage that other ones, some of these other bots do. Now, let me see something. Yeah, because he can't carry this as a weapon because of the whole thing with drift and keeping parity. That and they already do a bunch of damage, so that I get. But yeah, so let me know what you think. I would do a little bit more testing, probably start coming up with more strategies and everything for this. Um, I know they did make at least some changes earlier today. Okay, yeah, this did include the changes because the damage was actually much lower um, previously. So yeah, I just gotta test it more, see how I feel about it, and then I'll probably mess around with it a little bit more and do some more content on it. But let me know what you think. What kind of things would you like to see improved? And yeah, we'll try to see if we can get that stuff implemented. But all right, that's all I have for this week. I do have about one more week. Then I'm gonna be pre-recording the stream, and then I'll be back in the Deceptilab, probably close to right around the 4th of July. So probably that week of the 4th of July. I think the Thursday is the 3rd, and I don't have to work that Friday, so I um I plan to be live streaming again around that time. So I look forward to seeing you guys, um, next week. And I'll see you there, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Freezius out.